Hello, everybody. It is Friday. It is 20 UK. It is time for the Gin and Tonic Show. It is time to discuss Islam. It is time to talk about the things that are really important in life today, or maybe not. We always, as always, we have a full program in store for everybody today. We are still on the theme of the month, which is reality. And today it's about what do we say, law. So we're going to be looking at Islamic law at Sharia. Gin and Tonic Show. What is the Gin and Tonic Show? We talk about Islam. We criticize Islam. We critique the bad ideas of Islam. That does not mean that we are insulting every individual Muslim on this planet. It means that we are talking about an ideology, not the people. We do... Well, you have three ways of interacting with us, okay? Because it's going to Facebook, it's going to YouTube. So you can go and while we are live on a Friday evening, you can go and interact with us either through chat, typing, or you can go and type on Facebook, or you can go join the panel here today with us when we are live. If you have something to say, if you want to discuss something with us, you can come on. We are an open show. In other words, there's no censorship. You can say whatever you want to. We are free speech advocates. So we are not like a Muslim show where immediately you say something, we go and take the microphone away from you. Well, and then the third thing, of course, is that when we are done, you can always watch it in the archive on YouTube or on Facebook. We try and use facts, reality, and reasoning. And we try and just be decent human beings. So if you want to come and talk about Islam, this is the right place. We try and let the Quran speak for itself, and we do so without you having to pay a dime. So don't go to Patreon or PayPal or any one of those. You will not be able to spend your money this way on us. The way that we work is, I'll just quickly run you through this, get you into the introduction. Then we have one or two news items. Then we talk about the Quran, where I need to admit I'm a bit out of it. So I didn't go and do any research on chapter 6 because we finished chapter 5 last week. So we should be talking. We can always go and take a look at a couple of sentences in chapter 6 in real time and do this. Then what we're going to do is we're going to kick off with the reality section, the theme of the month, which is law. And we have today Thinking Clearly with us, who is going to give us an introduction into the legal issues as far as human rights are concerned. If you compare the Human Rights Declaration of the United Nations with the Human Rights Declaration of Islam, the OIC Declaration of Cairo of 1990, you can see some remarkable differences. And then we're going to ease off and go into questions and answers, and then end it with the hadith of the week. So the news item I have is that the Turks in Turkey, in Izmir, I don't know if you know of Turkey a little bit, south on the coast, opposite Greece, south of Istanbul. They were rattled because a protest song blared from mosques. So hackers broke into the sound system of mosques in this town of Izmir to play a popular Italian protest song and reigniting political and religious debates in polarized Turkey. Now remember, Turkey was completely Christian, and then it was taken over by the Ottomans and converted into an Islamic state. Then Ataturk came around 100 years ago and said, no, let's do away with this. And then it was Christians, it was Yazidis, it was all sorts of groups, all living side by side, and with absolutely no problem. And he abolished the Arabic writing, and he abolished the hijab, he abolished a lot of things. And today's president is trying to turn Turkey into a caliphate, with him as the caliph, of course. And he introduced all the things that Ataturk did away with. And that is why there's a lot of people who are protesting this, because they saw the effect this has in Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and they don't want that. And that is why they're protesting. So there you go. One thing I quickly want to do, I want to share with you something which I thought is newsworthy. I thought this is such a classic thing, so I thought I need to show it to you. This says, "Dear atheists, how is it," hang on, let me take this away. "How is it that cavemen survived the asteroid, but the dinosaurs didn't?" I thought this is so nice that people don't understand that there's like 60 million years in between. And I don't know how people could be this ignorant, but really, this like I saw another one. I don't know if I was too scared to put it up here. Why is it that ice freezes at exactly 0 degrees Celsius and it boils exactly at 100 degrees? Do you think that's coincidence too? I thought this was so classic. This was so nice. So I thought I'll share it with you. Another thing I want to share with you is this thing. And now this is not funny. This is a young guy. This is, I don't know, he's maybe 24, 25 or something. But this is a guy who is radicalizing himself. Now, I see his comments, and look at the way he comments to me. "I've already once expanded on the vanity of cognition you own, which is rotten with the deep-seated bigotry and emptiness. Your level of knowledge is equally hollow and is plagued with prejudice to such an extent that it speaks your ignorance even more forcefully each time. Incidentally, even at the time of the Prophet, a delegation of Christians from Najran visited him and offered, and it's supposed to say he offered them prayer in the mosque. What he's saying is the wrong way around. He's so full of hatred, he mixes this up. So what he's writing there is a contradiction. So it's Muhammad offered them a place to pray because Najran was somehow destroyed or something. "I know for sure you just can't help yourself out the preceding limitations, as it has seemingly relegated to incorrigible crude sickness. But still, I would advise you again that don't overtax and saddle your mind with the burden it's unable to deal with." Now, this guy, you can see that, he's not stupid, he's not dumb, he's educated, he knows how to use the language, and yet his views are that of a 7th century desert nomad. And this is what worries me sick if I see people like that. And I realize that this guy is somebody who is going to, I don't know, lead a group or whatever. This must have been horrible for him to grow up to have this level of hatred in him towards all those who are different to him. So that's amazing. All right, those two things I wanted to share with you. And if we go to, let's quickly go to the Quran. I prepared a screen here with the Quranic text. I just need to find it here. And this is now chapter 6. Now, just leave it like that if somebody wants to talk. Now, you're welcome to follow along if you have a different version of the Quran with different translations. I'm just using this one because, there's one translation that's much easier. I just want to do a couple of sentences because I was too lazy this week to do anything. So, in the name of God, the gracious, the merciful, right? Praise be to God who created the heavens and earth, who made the darkness and the light, yet those who disbelieve ascribe equals to their Lord. So the summary would be, I claim, I did everything, I'm the bestest, the greatest, and you don't want to believe me. So fuck you. 2, it is he who created you from clay that decided a term, determined by him, yet you doubt. So this, I don't know if you remember, we had the tree of life, starting with clay, and then we get the human beings, how they developed from clay into a life form. And then a term determined by him. This is so specific. It tells you exactly how many days, how many months, how many whatever it takes from conception to birth. It's amazing.
Doesn't that always talk about, that sort of disproves free will as well, doesn't it? If there's a decided term, there's nothing you can do about it. Right. So if you wanted to commit suicide, or if you thought you were going to live a long life, if there's a decided term, then whatever's going to happen is
No,
going to
sorry.
happen.
This term refers to the 9 months. Who created you from clay, then decided the term
You're talking
in which
about
you are going to go from clay to birth, and the term determined by him. This is the 9 months that it takes until you're born.
Right.
Can I just ask on that?
Sorry?
On that, you're saying that. Can I just ask that on that point there? Rob's just said about basically your life course, no matter how long you live, and if you decide to commit suicide. You've just turned around and said, actually, no, it's about the 9 months of being in the womb before birth. Where does the differentiation come from? Who is it that dictates, or where is the information to say, well, actually, it's in the womb before birth? That's the time decreed, and not the life course of the person. Where is that? Who comes to that conclusion? Does Allah say that somewhere in the Quran, or is it Hadith, or is that just some kind of assumption by the tafsirs?
It's a good question.
I'm just looking at the tafsirs now. Actually, they say that it's a fixed term with your death, for its extinction, and things created whose lifespan expires with death. Al-Jalalain, he who created you from clay, creating a father Adam, and then decreed a term for each of you, at the conclusion of which you die.
This
show that I was wrong. Then I read somewhere that it was referring to the term. Then this was, but it shows you how different the interpretation can be. Then I stand corrected, absolutely. If the majority of people at the time decided to understand this as a life term, okay.
Can I just interject there? When you're using the word term relating to life, I can understand why some people would come to the conclusion that it's talking about the pregnancy stage, because that they use the word term in context of like when a woman's carried a child to term. It's normally when the 9 months is complete, she's carried a child to the full term, then she gives birth. So that's where the terminology could maybe, for some people, that's what it means. But I've always come to the conclusion, being brought up as a Muslim, that when it talks about term, particularly when you go back to chapter 2 of the Quran, when it says, if we remember the account where some people stayed behind and they didn't go to fight for Muhammad, and they said they couldn't share the war. And Muhammad turns around and says, well, it didn't matter if you came or not, you would have died at home or in the battle. So this sort of like supports that, in as much that your decree of death has been decided by Allah. And then there's, I think it's the Hadith, where an angel comes down and says, whether you're going to have a good life or a bad life, and how long you're going to live. And then you've got the other point, and I forget where that comes from, about the angel of death coming and taking your soul. So all of those things that relate to a person's death, in my conclusion, when you put all of those on the table, are that a person's life course, and going back to what Robs has said, that if you decide to commit suicide, well, it had to happen at that moment, because that's when your life was going to be cut short. That just happens to be the death that was chosen for you to die at that moment. And just to conclude on this as well, you'll notice that it uses, now Adam was, now this is talking about Adam. Adam was in heaven when he was made of clay, because we are not made of clay. We are made of cells. Cells are not made of clay. They're made of water, DNA, proteins, and other such things. That's what we're made of. We're not made of clay. So this would have had to refer to Adam, because Adam was the first man who was, in this context, made of clay. But then, how does clay exist in the spirit realm? Clay is a physical object. Now, in all of the religions previous, they do not talk of heaven as being a physical location, or refer to it as a spiritual location. A plane of existence or dimension that we don't comprehend. And so in other religions, they mock this. You can't, right? So this is, again, doesn't make sense.
You have two problems. And first of all, Adam was created from dust, like Jesus. So we are created from clay, from water, from all sorts of things. But specifically Adam and Jesus, they were made from dust. But the thing is, a lot of people say, no, heaven was not in another place. Because I said to them, yeah, but hang on, what kind of a place is heaven if you have dust? And they said, no, but this heaven wasn't somewhere else. This was not the heaven. This was a different place on earth. So this Garden of Eden concept is not that it was some distant place or something that they had to be transferred over several light years or something like that.
But the thing is, when Adam was kicked out of heaven, they were all in heaven with because the angels were asked to bow down to Adam. So that had to have been in the spirit realm, which is heaven, where Allah is. Otherwise, the angels could not bow down there, could they? They had to have been all in the same location. Then he says, I'm going to create a vicegerent to be on the earth. Remember?
And apologists. Apologists say this. They always come up with this excuse. No, this was not in heaven. This heaven is on earth.
Yeah, but the apologists are going to say that. They're trying to clear up the mess, like the tafsirs do. So we shouldn't care what the apologists say, what the tafsir says. We should just care with what the Quran says. And the Quran is, at this moment in time, just gibberish. Just on the two verses.
It just doesn't say. It doesn't say where it is. It doesn't say where everything happens. Come on, they didn't know what was going on. They just took bits and pieces everywhere and then just cobbled everything together, and that's it. That's why you have this chaos that we see here as Quran. Okay, then sentence 3, he's God, heavens of the earth. He knows what you keep secret and what you make public. He knows what you earn. He knows what you earn. This is the typical strutting. The same thing again. I'm the best. I'm the greatest. I know everything, and you don't. So nah. Like a little child. To me, it looks like a little child anyway. So then, not one of the Lord's signs comes to them, but they turn away from it. Oh, poor me. Oh, yes, is my poor little, I'm the poor God and nobody loves me. Why don't they love me? All I want is the best for everybody. Every time I read this, I don't know why every time Trump comes to mind. Every single time. I'm the best. I know everything. I am the most stable genius. I have knowledge of everything, and you don't appreciate me. This is exactly what I see every time when I read this. They denied the truth when it came to them, but soon it will reach the news of what they used to ridicule. Okay, they is the non-believers, I suppose, denied the truth. Am I denying the truth? No, I'm not. If somebody tells me something that is correct, I will not deny it. And I can only deny what has been demonstrated to exist. So I cannot deny the existence of God because it's never been shown or demonstrated to exist. When it has come to them, well, it hasn't. But soon will reach them. Is it? Well, you've been promising this for a long time now.
Yeah.
The news of what they used to ridicule. Yeah.
When is soon, right? Unfalsifiable claim. What, soon before the sun becomes a red giant and engulfs the earth in 4 billion years? Well, I don't think humans will be around that long anyway, but whatever the time frame may be. Again, is this the best your God can do? If you ask a Muslim, what is their response going to be? Yeah. Soon, tell me. After 1,666 years after I die, God will come back, or it will be revealed to them, or whatever the case is. And we know an exact time when it's going to happen, or at least a date.
Allah knows best.
Yeah, but
have they not considered how many generations we destroyed before them? We had established them on earth more firmly than we established you, and we sent the clouds pouring down abundant rain on them. We made rivers flow beneath them, but we destroyed them for their sins and established other civilizations after them. Okay, go crazy. Somebody.
That's obviously referring to the flood, is it?
Well, I would say so, but I didn't want to lead you on. Of course.
It's not particularly clear, and presumably they would have known that it was Noah. Why didn't they mention that?
How many generations we destroyed before them? Us, me. So have I not considered how many generations it destroyed before me? We had established them on earth more firmly than we established you, and we sent the clouds for us. Now, the funny thing is, this is a contradiction. Okay, so please remember that Muslim apologists will tell you there is no global flood in the Quran. And they will tell you, yes, it's a local flood, and because it's this, no, it is not. It was a global flood, and here we can see why. We made rivers, we destroyed them.
Just on the subject, it had to have been a global flood from Islamic recension, because there's the account later on in the Quran where one of Noah's sons is standing on a mountain, and Noah says to him, "Well, get on the boat then." And his son says, "No, I'll stay on the mountain." And one of Noah's sons drowned. Well, for the water of being that high, it would have to have been a flood. And
yeah, but this was a hill. This was a local flood, and because this was in Babylon, there were no high mountains there, so this was just a hill.
The thing is, if it was a local flood, if it was a local flood, well, why build a boat? Just go somewhere where the flood wasn't going to affect you. Walk somewhere higher.
Never know. Now you're delivering the killer anecdote and vaccination for anything in the Quran, and that is logical thinking. As soon as you apply that, that's it. End of story. Okay, so I think we all agree this is what it's talking about, but I don't know why Muslims say, no, this is not this. Okay. Had we sent down upon you a book on paper, oh dear, can you believe that? Had we sent down a book on paper and they had touched it with their hands, those who disbelieve would have said, this is nothing but plain magic.
How can words of this context be considered magic? How? When it tells you to beat your wife or slavery, how can these words be considered magic? What? Can somebody help me understand that? Am I missing something here?
Well, this is the whole point. This is why this is why it was revealed in an oral transfer or transfer mode or transmission or whatever. This is why it's a revelation, which was intended to be in oral form, because they didn't want this written down and everything, because then people will say this is magic. So it had to be revealed bit by bit. So, this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, I don't know, this is quite funny. And they said, why was an angel not sent down to him? Had we sent down an angel, the matter would have been settled and they would not have reprieved. Okay. I don't know. Does anybody understand this?
No.
That's number 8, right?
Yeah.
So basically, if we'd sent an angel down, it would have been like a miracle they would have all believed in, and then they would not have reprieved. There would have been no respite would have been granted. The matter would have been settled if we'd sent an angel down. Well, apparently they sent an angel. They just sent it the wrong person, which was Muhammad in a cave that nobody else saw. Right? If they'd sent that angel down somewhere, an entire crowd of literate people had seen it and could communicate with it and use critical thinking, they could well have settled the matter. But of course,
exactly. Why didn't you? This is the question that I have. Had we sent down an angel? So why the hell didn't you?
Or what happened to the time that when Muhammad was praying and he was jittery slightly, and someone says, "Why were you jittery?" And he says, "Because I was grappling a demon and I was going to tie him to the post for all of you to see." So if it wasn't an angel, he could have shown him a demon at least.
Had we made him an angel, we would have made him a man and confused them when they are already confused. Oh, come on. Who worships this text? Had we made him an angel? Okay, had we sent down an angel, the matter would have been settled, all right? Had we made him an angel, does that mean not convert him into an angel? But if we provided an angel, we would have made him, not the angel, but the guy who is supposed to read the Quran, we would have made him a man and sorry, I can't. Rob, what does your text say? Doesn't say anything.
On 8 or 9 now, sorry.
John.
9.
9 is, and if we had made it an angel, we should have sent him as a man, and we should certainly cause them confusion in the matter which they were already covered with confusion. So is this maybe a dig at the idea of sending down somebody like Jesus? Is this like an idea, hey, if we'd send down somebody, quote, like Jesus, which is what those people thought, and their and they were confused, that wouldn't have been a good idea. So is it like a simple dig at that?
Interesting. That could be, and confuse them when they are already confused because they were confused about whether Jesus is a god or prophet. Then, okay, it could be. Okay, but for me, this is messengers before you were ridiculed, but those who mocked them became besieged by what they ridiculed. Oh, come on, this is getting worse and worse. Messengers before you. Okay, if this is Jesus, had we made him an angel, this could be, if this is Jesus, then messengers before you were ridiculed, but those who mocked them, the messengers, became besieged by what they ridiculed. So those who mocked the messengers, no, all right, okay, I give up.
It sounds like they were. It's like in what they say in France, foiled by the Rome petard. They tried to mock the apostles, but that mocking eventually brought reproach on themselves. I think that's what it's trying to say.
Yeah, that's kind of what yeah, exactly. That's what the tafsirs are kind of saying. Yeah.
All right. Shall we call it a day on this one? Because this is really, I don't know.
I've got a special guest anyway. So, yep.
I'll see if I can find a condensed version of this. I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I don't know how I'm going to make a condensed version of this. Because this is really so weird. All right. Then after the Quran, we are going to, after the news and after the Quran, we come to the next segment, which is the theme of the month. This month, it's Quran versus reality, or Quranic claims about reality, or does the Quran correctly represent reality? We've been through science, we've been through morality, we've been through non-believers, we've looked at the history, and today we're going to be looking at law. What is the effect of the Quran on reality today if we compare it to what is actually stipulated there? And for this, today we have Thinking Clearly, who's going to give us a bit of background on the human rights element of the Quran and how it is being implemented today versus the humanist United Nations version. Hit it.
Thanks, Stops. Appreciate that. Yeah, so I'm going to briefly go through very small bit of history about the two declarations, which should just take a minute or two, and then I'm going to focus specifically on 5 particular rights that are mentioned in the UN declaration, and then contrast that to their equivalents in the Cairo Declaration, and show, in my view, how the Cairo Declaration isn't really a document about human rights. It's about countering the human rights that were established back in 1948 with the original UN Declaration. I could have done a lot more because there's respectively 27 and 32 documents, but it would take me a long time to go through that. So I'm just going to pick kind of 5 of what I think are the most important, and just show how blatantly one is trying to destroy the other. So just to give a small bit of context. So the declaration put together in 1948. So you're just coming a couple of years after the end of the Second World War. And the principle was to establish consensus that all the nations of the world could get behind in terms of basic human rights for people. And considering the chaos of World War II, I think it's a pretty remarkable achievement. Bearing in mind they're trying to build consensus between Christian states, Muslim states, Buddhist states, a recently independent India, so obviously a Hindu majority state, as well as kind of more secular places like the Soviet Union. And I think it really highlights. I'm gonna read just the first sentence of the preamble of both documents because it really highlights what I think behind both. So we're just going to use the UN one first, which is, whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice. Now, I think that is a great start. And one of the key I want to point out is all of those words universalist. It's about human family, freedom, justice, inalienable rights, and equality. And there's no religious language. There's no particular talking about a god or gods or any kind of belief. The only mention of religious belief is guaranteeing the freedom of it within the document. So there, secular context kind of feel well, religion respected, also respect everybody else's. Now, if you look at the first line of the Cairo Declaration, which was brought together in 1990 as part of the Organization of the Islamic Conference, OIC, their stated aim was to sort of portray the Islamic verse. But if you read the first line, it says, reaffirming the civilizing and historical role of the Islamic Ummah, which Allah made as the best community and which gave humanity a universal and well-balanced civilization. So from my perspective, that is a statement of Islamic supremacism in the very first sentence of the document. It is basically saying, we're the best, and we're going to show you how. And the rest of the preamble of the Cairo Declaration is essentially talking about how everything has to fit in with Sharia. So it's already quite troubling within the first sentence where you're going to go, how these two documents are going to diverge. But I'm going to pick now. I'm going to go through the 5 human rights that I'm going to start with here. So the first one is the most basic, which is the right to life. So in the UN document, very simple. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and the security of person. Nice and simple. Now, the Cairo equivalent, which is Article 2, Part A, says life is a God-given gift, and the right to life is guaranteed to every human being. It prohibits to take away life except for a Sharia prescribed reason. So again, as far as I'm concerned, that's basically saying we'll respect this right unless we don't want to, unless there's something in the Quran, something in Sharia that says that it's okay for us to take your life. Now, you can argue that, you know, there's various countries around the world that do have the death penalty and have their own potentially secular version of getting around that. But when you look at the number of reasons that you can be killed under Sharia, it leaves you in such a precarious situation that they have essentially, certainly as a non-Muslim particularly, it puts you in a situation where that right to life is essentially nullified if you do anything out of the Islamic code. So I think it's a particularly egregious betrayal of what the UN article was trying to say. So I'm going to go on to the second right here. This one is about humane treatment. So you have, no one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Now, the Cairo article equivalent, which is 2b, says safety from bodily harm is a guaranteed right. It's the duty of the state to suffer it, and it's prohibited to breach it without a Sharia prescribed reason. So again, this is something that pops up quite a bit. So essentially, you're saying that, yeah, we'll prevent torture, we'll, you know, stop any cruel, inhumane treatment, but we will reserve the right to cut your hands off if you steal. We'll reserve the right to whip you, to stone you, and all the other methods of dismemberment and torture that come along under Sharia rules. So again, I think it's just a direct destruction of that basic human right. So I'm going to move on to the third one now. This is freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. So this is the UN version. Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change your religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. So I think it's a nice, clear statement to say that you've got freedom of conscience. You can believe whatever you want. You can worship however you see fit. Now, the Cairo equivalent, Islam is the religion of the true unspoiled nature. It is prohibited to exercise any form of pressure on man or to exploit his poverty or ignorance in order to force him to change his religion to another religion or to atheism. So essentially, it's enshrining Islam as the world religion. It's a complete destruction of the idea that everybody's got their own choice. Everybody's got the right to believe whatever they want to believe or not to believe at all. And it essentially makes illegal any attempts of conversion away from Islam. Although the right to do that for Muslims against non-Muslims is kept in perfect tact. So not only is it destroying the right of freedom of religion, it's destroying any sense of equality between those religions, because Islam can have this way of just, you know, countering or converting others, but it's denied to everybody else. So I'm going to move on to the fourth of the five. This is the right to freedom of speech. So the UN article says everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. So again, a nice, clear declaration of, you know, quite a broad range of you know, how you can kind of protect freedom of speech. The Cairo article, everyone shall have the right to express his opinion freely in such manner as not to be contrary to the principles of the Sharia. So once again, we have that phrase in there that is essentially an anathema to everything that is said in the UN article. You know, it's a destruction of the right, and essentially putting blasphemy conditions on freedom of speech, although only against Islam once again. So if you are a Muslim, you can insult other religions or insult atheists, and that's fine. And it particularly puts in my mind, when people say that phrase, when you say everything that is said before the word but is bullshit, you can ignore it. Well, I get that view by reading the Cairo Declaration. It's every right that you can read before the word Sharia is basically going to be flushed right down the toilet, and you're not going to have it. So we're going to move on to the last of the five rights here, which is equality of men and women. And this is in two stages. So the UN article, and this one is particularly insidious because it all balances around pretty much one change of an important word. The UN article says everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in the declaration without any distinction, things like race, color, sex, language, religion, political affiliation, etc. Everyone is entitled to it. The Cairo article equivalent says all men are equal in terms of basic human dignity and obligations. And then in manner of, you know, discrimination of race, color, language, it basically uses the same language as in the UN article, but it's got that key difference. Everyone in the UN article and men in the Cairo article. And that's followed on by Article 16, which talks specifically about marriage in the UN article. It says men and women full of age without any limitation have equal rights to marry, equal rights to, you know, dissolve that marriage. The Cairo equivalent says woman is equal to man in human dignity and has her own rights to enjoy as well as duties to perform, and a right to retain her name, lineage, financial independence, etc. So once again, key here, women have equal dignity, but not equal rights. So that only took a couple of words to completely destroy the meaning of that, which is trying to establish equality between the sexes, allow women to be able to engage in society as much as men. Just a couple of words difference in the Cairo article, which is completely destroying the very spirit of it. So I could have gone on because there are a number of other areas such as education, equality before the law, things like asylum rights and rights as a citizen, right to move to another country, which they're a little bit more subtle language, but essentially each one of these rights are being corrupted. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the comment section at the end of it, once this video goes out, I'm going to put my more detailed notes where I'm going to cover every single one of the articles. So if people want to go and read them, they can see how almost every single article is destroyed by its Cairo equivalent. But I think those five that I've given kind of give you a broad outline of kind of the insidious nature of this document. It's not a human rights document. It's simply clothed in human rights sounding language in order to make Sharia sound kind of more civilized. There was one surprising thing that I found, though, is that both documents do declare that slavery, you know, is the right not to be enslaved should be a right, which obviously if you're going to follow Sharia, that wouldn't quite be the case. So I'm thinking this is partly just because of the times that the two documents were written. I think writing in 1990, I don't think Saudi Arabia, who was particularly responsible for sponsoring this, would have got away with declaring that, it's okay under Sharia to enslave someone. So I think it was just a step too far. But also, if you look at the rest of that particular right, it then goes on to talk about colonialism as the worst kind of enslavement. And I think it was basically used as something to target against the West in terms of wars that were going on, against Muslims, etc., or, involving Muslim majority countries that the West was getting involved with. So I think it was more of a way to kind of use it as a political weapon against the West. Whether I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I think that was the reason they were doing it. I think they would undermine that if they then said that Sharia could allow you to be enslaved. But again, it's a fascinating topic, and I could go into it a lot more detail, but I think I'll be boring everyone. So I'm just going to quickly summarize now. So I don't think it's a human rights document at all. And I think, considering that it came, 40 years afterwards, the best that Islam by itself could do was essentially regurgitate medieval law. Whereas when it was a collaborative human effort, straight after the Second World War, they were able to establish the most fundamental human rights document that's ever come out. So I think that kind of shows what Sharia has in plan if it's allowed to just do what it wants by itself. And so I'm not sure it's like an iron case for secularism writing laws, but it sure as shit is a good case against Sharia ever writing laws for the world. And as I say, I'll put some notes down at the end of the comment section, but that's it. So yeah, back to you guys, and thanks for letting me talk.
Wow, brilliant. Thumbs up, everybody. Come on, let's see some thumbs up for this, because this I think is very nice. I like the idea that you took just 5 areas and then you just sort of straight up comparison. Very nice. I like that. Because I've spent some time on this, so I know this is actually quite difficult. So I'm very, very pleased with what you've done.
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Thank you.
Yeah, great job, mate.
And as I'll say, I'll put some more detailed note to it. It's kind of archived. I'm sorry I didn't have it with any kind of presentation with any visuals, but as I say, I'll put my detailed note.
No.
I'll put my detailed notes at the bottom so people can have a look and they can go through all the other rights and just see. Well, I mean, it's my opinion, but I think the documents speak for themselves, and I just think it's fascinating. I mean, the history of the documents are also fascinating, but just comparing one law to another, it's blatantly obvious, in my opinion, that it's, it was designed in terms of just saying we want world Sharia rather than actual real human rights. So thanks.
Yeah. Super. No, thank you. Now, obviously, what we've heard now is the word Sharia left, right, and center. So, what is Sharia? Now, we've done a program, a full 2 hours on Sharia, but that was some time ago. So, I'm not sure everybody still remembers this. So, in case you haven't, Sharia is actually, the path to the water or something like this. From the word.
Sorry, stop. Can I interrupt?
Yeah, sure.
Say one more thing.
Sure.
Sorry, just one more thing. It kind of links to maybe what you're about to say. It doesn't actually define in the Cairo document what Sharia actually is. And obviously there's several schools of it, 5 schools across the 2 major branches. I think you could argue it was possibly because they were trying to get Shia allies to sign up to it. But I also think it makes it even worse, because even if you were to try to stick to these laws as a Muslim or a non-Muslim, you don't know what school is going to be implemented. So potentially you could get 5 different schools of Sharia all punishing you under this same so-called human rights document. So I think the fact that they haven't even laid it out what Sharia is makes it even worse. But yeah, sorry, I'll leave it to you now.
But that's exactly the point that I was going to make, because it's a nebulous term and the contents is equally nebulous, because there is no such thing as Sharia. Because Sharia consists only of the basis Quran, basis Hadith, basis the Sunnah in general, with the anything to do with Muhammad, plus the jurisprudence, the interpretation on a legal topic. So what we have is a set of, guidance recommendations which have only one thing, one common rule or law they are not allowed to contradict the Quran. So everything is based on the Quran. Now, I don't know. Every time I have this problem now, because every time I see Sharia, I have this go. Everything you go to the Sharia. I don't know if you know The Sound of Music, and The Sound of Music has a song, "What is Wrong with Maria?" And Satan made this song. I can't remember the title. Is it really "What is Wrong with Maria"? Something about Maria, and then he substituted it with Sharia. And every time I see the word Sharia now, this song comes to mind, and I see this, and I just have to laugh. This is so stupid. Okay, but everybody needs to go to BitChute because he was chucked off YouTube because they closed the channel over and over. So he's on BitChute now. So it's a brilliant thing. What is the problem with Sharia? Really great. Highly recommend.
Is that the guy that does the animated videos?
Yes.
Oh right, yeah. He's good.
And he has these characters which are drawn, but you can recognize them. Rob, why can't we hear you?
You should be able to hear me. Am I not coming through?
Because I can hear something very faint in the background, and then I realize, oh, this is you.
Let me rejoin then.
But it's not only me, right?
No, the volume was very low. I could barely hear him.
Yeah, okay, because I suddenly heard something and I thought, is that Rob? Quite strange. Okay, so Sharia. Sharia is based on the Quran, okay? Then it adds some of the Sunnah, and then it's the jurisprudence from the various scholars. This is, I think, is what you were referring to, that you suddenly have different versions of scholarship because you have the different madhabs, the different schools of jurisprudence. Welcome back, Rob. Let's see something, hear something.
Can you hear me now? Am I coming through?
Oh my God! Oh yes, he's blowing everybody away. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Let me turn it down.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Turn you down a bit there.
So I don't know what actually happened to you. You've had this before, I remember. It's Apple.
Yeah, it was a bit of a dropout. I thought you had dropped out there, but clearly it was me dropping out. Okay, hopefully I'm okay now.
Yeah.
Cool.
But who buys Apple?
Just remember an invitation to Discord after the show, and hopefully we might have a Muslim join us. I did invite him multiple times, so I said to him after 9, so we'll see whether we get joined by a Muslim later.
Great. Okay, so Sharia, what is that? Why do we hear this all the time? All right, we know what it's based on. The thing is, there is no book Sharia. There is no set of rules. It's not paragraph 1. Well, it is paragraph 1. The Quran is always right. Paragraph 2, should this not be the case, paragraph 1 automatically takes over. So these are the only 2 paragraphs that you have. But there's no real set of established rules which says that if a wife has sex with a guy and then this is there's a whole lot of ifs and buts and blah blah blah, because the Quran is highly vague, contradictory, nebulous, and everything. Because it says, for example, you need to prove that the wife was adulterous. Well, how do you do that? Well, you need 4 witnesses. What do the 4 witnesses have to witness before you can do it? Well, it doesn't say. So this is where you have to go to the Hadith. This is where you have to go to Sharia to find out, well, they have to actually see the penis penetrate the vagina before it is, or it can be called, adultery. And then the punishment will be admonished accordingly. But then they said, well, what if we don't have 4 witnesses? Well, then it says, well, then the husband can testify 4 times the same thing, and then it's also as though 4 witnesses saw this, so only the husband can function as 4 witnesses in one. This is I don't know how a mind can work to say you need 4 witnesses, or the husband saying the same thing 4 times, but then the wife can testify 4 times that she didn't. And then you don't have any witnesses. So what is the whole point. And this is where Sharia comes in and says, okay, well, we're going to do away with what the Quran says because the Quran doesn't know what the hell it's talking about. So we're going to come up with our own laws. And that is if somebody sees this, or if there's evidence, like if she falls pregnant or something, then obviously this is the case and therefore she needs to be punished. So there you go. But now, what is the punishment? And this is now, this is the thinking clearly thing, what he just said. There it depends now on the madhab, because the Shafis and the Malikis, and in some cases, say, no, it is not literal, and the Hanbalis do. And sometimes it's this way, sometimes it's the other way around. So you have all these, normally they're like regional. So if you're a Muslim, after a while you will go and pick, even if you're living in the UK, you normally pick one. There's Muslims now who say, no, I'm not going to pick one, I'm just going to say general. Or you have Quranists who say, no, this doesn't go for me at all. So out of what I estimate to be maybe a billion Muslims, you have 1,000 subgroups. So the numbers of each group that agree on something in the Quran is very small. So the same goes for Sharia, and this is why, and I like the way that you pointed this out, thinking was that they are hoping to some day to come together, because this is the plan of the Muslim Brotherhood, that one day everybody will reunite as one big ummah. Because at the moment it's a mess, okay? Because just go back 100 years when you had the Ottoman Empire, everybody was, sort of united under one umbrella, then this fell apart, and then it was like a shadow of itself. Islam didn't really exist anymore. It was just some weird group of the people running around a black stone in Mecca or something that was secret, and you were not allowed to go there. And people didn't really care about this. And then in the 70s, this changed. All of a sudden, then people became aware of it. And then 79, with the Ayatollah returning from Paris, this was a big thing. And then the Shah going off and dying and things. So then suddenly there was a lot of visibility. And then this further increased 2001 in September, when they flew the planes into the World Trade Center. And this has changed now. Now, for me, the peak of Islam was like, I would say 10 years after that, because 9/11 caused a lot of interest, a lot of visibility for Islam. And people said, oh, shame, maybe they're poor people and they're not terrorists, they're freedom fighters. And there was a huge wave of conversion where a lot of people joined Islam because they thought, maybe this is just misunderstood. But most of them have left again. And since then, now it's crumbling, and Islam is just falling apart. Because we can see this. We can see that there are suddenly funny groups with Quranists and all the different groups who are totally at odds with each other. So the Sharia is actually a stupid thing.
Don't you think it's a bit odd, though, that this wave of conversions after 9/11? I can't ever remember in England that after a terrorist bombing from the IRA, there was a big swathe of people saying, "Oh, I'm going to become a Catholic now and find out what's going on."
Yeah, true.
It's quite bizarre in my mind.
Yeah, but this is the propaganda.
If I could just interject on that, I think with the IRA, I think you'd have to be stupidly perverse or hopelessly ignorant to not see that was just a political ideology and not a religious one. And the thing is with political ideologies, you're not so emotionally bonded to it. It is just an intellectual demonstration. Whereas with religion, you're more emotionally tied with it. So the IRA for me, and being 52 and having lived through what I read in the papers at the time, it seems more like gangsters using the pretext of religion, but anybody would have understood it wasn't religion being involved there. Whereas with Islam, you're more emotionally tied to it because it's religion.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I think that's true. There wasn't lots of IRA members going around quoting parts of the Bible, was there, when they were doing it? So,
yeah, but if you see this in Christianity, how come you can't see it in Islam? I don't understand why people still talk about the religion of Islam. It is not a religion. It is a way of life, and it is an ideology. That's it.
I think what you're saying there, though, Stops, is that when you're looking at other demonstrations of violence throughout the world, there isn't a religious text or a holy text or a perceived theistic ideology that promotes wanton violence with everybody and anybody that's in opposition to what you believe. The Quran is quite unambiguous in this area about its manifesto against those who do not believe in what it proclaims as to be truth. When the very God says that if anybody that doesn't worship me is the worst of creatures, and that's coming from the top down, what are you to expect from their adherents but that kind of manifestation of attitude?
You're gonna burn fire. Da-da-dum. Yeah, unfortunately.
Well,
Anyway,
yeah, you're right. I mean, it shows in the Cairo Declaration. I mean, the very first line is "We're the best."
That's the whole thing. Exactly. This is what I was going to get back to, because this is what they say in the Cairo Declaration. This is what it says in Sharia. This is what it says in the Quran, that this false supremacy that we have actually is, I don't know, it's instilled into the people. They are indoctrinated with this feeling of false supremacy, that we are the nation that is selected by Allah. Allah created us as the people the others have to follow. And that is ridiculous. And then they go and they say, yeah, but we had the golden age. But then when you look at the golden age and you actually analyze it, it falls apart as well. So there's nothing really left. So what is there to follow? It is just the threat that you don't go to hell, which is terrible, and the promise of a reward, and both happen when you're dead.
Just go back what Rob's was saying about Islam is systematically internally dismantling. I don't think the imams, the scholars for dollars, the apologists and the polemicists are doing Islam much of a favor anymore now. Whereas once upon a time, the internet. When I was growing up, all you had was a DVD that you couldn't interact with. So you watched Ahmadiyya debate someone or give a speech. It was pretty much that's all you got. That's what you're brought up with. But the advent of the modern media today, with the internet and YouTube and other platforms, there is a level of interaction. For instance, you can watch something. There are comments underneath. There are debates now. So, and also the internet has allowed you to go research things more at home. You don't have to go to the library. You don't have to be so proactive. And which has also allowed that when you went to a library, you were kind of limited with what kind of information that library had at that particular time. Whereas the internet, it is the library of the world now, so you have access to more information. So people are now can listen to what they're listening to on YouTube or a DVD or whatever, and do their own research if they're proactive enough to do so. That being said, you're getting now Muslims that have been challenged by atheists, by other Christian denominations, by Jewish denominations, basically anybody that's not a Muslim or any organizations non-Islamic that are challenging Islam. And like, for instance, history. Islam claims to mention something about history. When you research history, you find nothing of the claims there. You go looking in archaeology, historicity and such, and you find nothing. So this has now led to people like Yasser Qadi saying, well, we don't know who Dulkarnain is. We don't know where the wall is. We do not know who Gog and Majuga, Gog and Magog. We don't know anything about these now. So there is a level of honesty that now they're going to have to come out with that is actually having an effect on Islam. Then you get the other spectrum where you got idiots, like Ali Dawah and Hijab, who do their form of polemics and defenses of Islam, and they're just so shoddy. You can tell they're lying. You have to be stupidly perverse or hopelessly ignorant to take these guys seriously. So you've got two extremes. You've got the Yasser Qadi on one side, and you've got the hijabs on the other side, and you've got all the other people in the middle, your Zakir Naiks, your Abdul Rahim Greens, and the Hamza Zortzis. And each, from one angle on your swingometer, Islam has got no one credible to defend it. And Islam has fallen at seams because when you've got people that are inquiring about Islam, that are looking into it from inside and outside, they're just being torn apart. There are atheist channels, there are other Christian denomination channels, and very probably, I've never seen a Hindu one or what, but I dare say there probably are now in India, that are just totally fragmenting and dismantling Islam from every possible conceivable attitude. So when you're looking at Islam, it goes to with what Rob's saying. It is self-destructing now, and the destruction is itself. It's bringing its own destruction.
There was a Sikh guy as well who was doing. I think he had a debate with. Oh, who was it? Was it Hijab or no? Maybe Ali Dawah. I can't remember. But
it was at the shopping centre.
Yeah,
was that the shopping centre about language?
It was a shopping centre or a train station or something like that. But he tore him to. They were going on about the the 40. What's the term for it? 40 variations in one sentence of a word in the Quran.
Yeah.
The rhetoric devices. Rhetorical devices.
Rhetorical devices, that was it. And the Sikh guy was brilliant because he just said, "Is this all your religion means to you? Rhetorical devices." And he absolutely ripped him to shreds. So you're right. It shows that everybody can just take a piece out of this ideology because it's so easy.
But that's how desperate the religion has become now, that it has to play on words, the ambiguity on the words now. You see, the further back in Islam you go, the more stringent and hardcore and singular those words, the meaning of those words were. When it said beat your wife, it literally meant beat your wife. When it says I was going to punish you in hell, it meant punish you in hell. But the further forward we're coming, because the advent of the information age now, where information is available to everybody, and Islam has been exposed for the excrement that it is, you have nothing else now to defend it but rhetorical devices. Well, actually, you're taking it out of context. That word doesn't mean that. You have to look at the root word. Islam is a religion where you go back. It's in proper Arabic. It has, each word has 10 different meanings now. That's all it has now, is the interpretation of what the words mean, because it has been torn apart morally, it has been torn apart legally, it has been torn apart scientifically, it has been torn apart by other religious texts that it's supposed to have come from, it's been torn apart historically. What leg is there left for Islam to stand on? It has been torn apart now in recent times, with people turn around and say whether Muhammad even existed or not. It has been torn apart now where it has now been factually proven that Mecca did not even exist at the time of Muhammad. All the mosques are pointing in the wrong direction. They're pointing to Petra, not Mecca. That has now come about. So really, there's nothing left for it to stand on anymore now. It's just wishful desire and hope. That they're clinging to a hope, and that's all they've got left.
That's a true story. Rob, what Jesus, you haven't said anything in a while. What do you know about Sharia? What do you think of it?
Sorry, I just had a slight distraction there.
That's what it was.
So,
okay.
Again, my understanding is it's implemented in different ways in different countries. There isn't one codified thing. But again, that just says to me that obviously they can't get clear on what it is you're supposed to do. Again, I just appeal, God could easily have put this down in an obelisk in the middle of Mecca that lays out the rules. You still have free will to follow it or not, but at least you know the rules. Everybody can go and read them. There's no dissent. There's no discussion. It's there. It's clear as day to every human that can read in any of their own languages. And I speak to the person in, Japanese, and if he could understand English, I understand Japanese. We both understand the same thing. We go, goodness gracious, look at this. I read that in Japanese. You read it in English. That's exactly what I read. That's phenomenal. Instead, we get a mishmash of everything that's with a lot of backward ideas that today people are desperate to try and hide away from and to surrender up and say, well, it doesn't really mean anything. And as our friend Maverick says, there's no real Sharia in the Quran. So they all want to back away. They just want to make up the stuff as they go along because they've had a tsunami of collision with the West that just makes them, these ideas from the 7th century look like they belong in the 7th century. And that's the difficulty that Muslim has, is trying to reconcile these 7th century backward ideas with modern modernity, or modern modernity. And it just looks rather silly, right? So now you have a tap dance, or you have, as we heard earlier today on Valley Stream, big up to old Valley, we had a couple of Muslims trying to defend child marriage and sex with children. What does it really mean to be a child? Somebody asks. Would you marry a 10-year-old? And this sort of defense, right? Because at least they're trying to be consistent with the book. The others, like Maverick, just jettison all of that. Well, it doesn't really mean that. Hey, if you really understood the Arabic, it means it was a 25-year-old, not a 6-year-old or whatever it might be. And it doesn't mean this, it doesn't mean that. It means whatever anybody wants it to mean, which is just entirely elastic.
Which is an interesting point, because you're talking about Sharia law and you're talking about various locations around the world, and that's where things like, for me, for instance, where it talks about the word mischief is in the Quran, and the word mischief is a very ambiguous statement, because it turns around and says, well, if the punishment for those who cause mischief is in the land is for them to be crucified with their hands and feet chopped off on alternative sides. Well, mischief is ambiguous. What does mischief actually mean? Well, it depends where you are and what your status is in the world and your influence on Islam and Sharia, whether it's in a full Muslim land, or if it's in a Western land where Islam is not in control, or if it's somewhere in the middle in certain countries where it's part political and part Sharia or part Islamic law. That word mischief can mean anything you want it to mean. This is why you have the problem. So when you're in a full Islamic land, mischief can be up to apostasy, so you execute them. But mischief in, say, the Western world can be, well, if you insult Islam, or, well, you know, it's hate speech. It could be anything like that. So the ambiguity the ambiguity is determined by the location and influence of Islam in any one given area, which goes back to what has been said time and again, time and again. The Islam that you have in the Quran is kind of like two forms of Islam. There was the Islam when Muhammad was a minority, and you have the Islam when Muhammad was a majority. So when you're in the Western world, you quote the Islamic side that appeals to the Western listener, where Muhammad was in a slightly minority situation. So Islam looks a bit more appealing. But when you're in an Islamic controlled country, you start citing the part of the Quran which abrogates, funnily enough, the previous stuff. We've got to remember the law of abrogation, convenient abrogation. When you're in an Islamic controlled country, you start using the more hardline Muhammad approach, or the latter. Well, it's not even allegedly, it's supposed to be Allah's approach. So you quote hardline Allah because you're in a majority now, and there's no one that can stand up to you, because if anybody stands up to you, well, that's just mischief as well in itself. So you execute them.
Okay, so what we see is that everybody has their own interpretation. Everybody has their own way of looking at what the Quran is, what the Islam is, what everything is. And I think we are able to see that this inconsistency is breaking up Islam from the inside. And that is why, and welcome to a Facebook comment, we just saw that the atheist tsunami is inevitable. And I agree with that. It's just, we need to find the critical mass. We need to find some size where people leaving Islam in droves is not going to get them threatened, is not going to get them killed. This is the same thing as what happened when they tore down the Berlin Wall. One person made one small mistake, and suddenly it was a tsunami, and suddenly the borders were open, and everything stopped. The same way as with Russia, all of a sudden it collapsed just from one day to the next.
But Russia was located in one area, though. Islam is worldwide, and that most of the people are in the communist rule. True, I totally get your point, but I understand the metaphor you're using. Don't think for a minute I don't, but I'm just kind of recognizing that as an ex-Muslim, it's a little bit difficult when family and community are involved. Well, there's an emotional tie to the religion in itself.
Yeah,
that's the point I wanted to get out.
Okay, no, point taken. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what we've established is there's no Sharia. So when we're talking about Sharia, nobody really knows what it is. Now, Sharia is based on the Quran, is based on all sorts of things, but it is, I would say 90% human, what do you want to call this? Human will or I don't know what you want to call this. It's just people think, okay, if I say this and this about the Quran, then I can argue this and this point, so I'm going to make it this. So it is just a declaration of what a human thinks it should be. It's like a fatwa. A fatwa is also just a recommendation. You can just leave it. But the same goes for Sharia. But funny enough, there are some components in Sharia that most Muslims will adhere to, will believe, will subscribe to, will sign up for. And this one thing that they will, I don't know why, but they all believe that women are worth less than men. And this I will not understand. This I will not understand. And you pointed this out, thinking that even in the Human Rights Declaration, they cannot get it over themselves to get to there and write that humans, men and women, all have equal rights. Even there, they cannot get themselves to do this. So this is...
Yeah, I mean, and it's really telling, and it's almost embarrassing, because when they feel like they know there's something wrong there, so they have to fill it with another word. So instead of saying equal rights, we'll say equal dignity.
Dignity, yeah, exactly.
I mean, yeah, but that's a nothing. I mean, it's a nothing word, isn't it? I mean, that's like, you know, you got the freedom to agree with me. I mean, it means nothing.
And this is what is so sad, that everybody agrees with this. I don't know why everybody agrees with this. There's a conflict between men and women. I mean, come on, of course women are different. Of course women are completely different. There's a different psyche, there's a different mentality, there's a lot of differences between men and women. But that does not mean that I cannot grant them the same human rights. That's what I'm always talking about. And Muslims said to me, yeah, but do you have a penis or not? No, you're not a man. You don't have a penis if you think that women should have equal rights. Now, exactly this is, I am stronger than a Muslim. I have far more integrity in everything because I can grant women the same equal human right as me, and still tell them, yes, if you want to have children, you're the one that has to burden yourself for 9 months with carrying a baby. I can't. And this is a physical fact.
Stops. What's even more embarrassing about that? What's even more embarrassing between the differences between those two documents is that the one that was advocating full equality for women was written in 1948.
Yeah, exactly.
And then almost 50 years later, you know, so that's pretty forward thinking for the time. And yet, you know, almost 50 years later, you know, Islam still can't even catch up to that. I mean, they're still, you know, citing stuff in the 12th or whatever.
And the thing is, I fully grant that we still have not reached this. And it's good that you're pointing this out, that this was forward thinking, because we still don't have equality. I agree. And unfortunately, it is like that we still have this pay gap. We still have a lot of things that are different. We still need to, you know, work on these things, but at least we have a very clear goal. And this is the thinking forward definition of equal rights. And Islam doesn't have that. Now, you said that the declaration...
If you think about it as well, I mean... Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay. Did you think... You said that the declaration did away with slavery, because I don't actually remember reading that. So does it say any form of slavery?
Yeah, I mean, I've got it right here. If you want, it's quite short, so I mean, I can read it if you like.
Yeah, let's go there, because remember that in this case, apologists are quite shifty. Okay, you need to pay attention, because if you say, well, this this and this form of slavery, then it doesn't mean slavery in the Quran. So they're trying.
Well, stops. Let me read it, because it is quite short. So I think it's fairly unambiguous. So let me just quickly read it. It says, and this is the Cairo Declaration, Article 11: human beings are born free, and no one has the right to enslave, humiliate, oppress, or exploit them. Well, the only slight qualification is the last bit of the sentence, and it says there can be no subjugation but to Allah. So I suppose you might be able to argue that, you know, they could twist that to say, well, once Allah is ruling the land, then Sharia allows slavery.
No, this is that you are a slave to Allah.
But I mean, I think, as I say, if you look. But if you look at the second part of that same article, it says, it starts talking about colonialism as the worst kind of enslavement, and we must stop. All states must form together to support the struggle of colonized peoples, and blah blah blah. And I'm not saying, obviously, you know, I agree with that, but I think it was politically motivated, rather because Islam, you know, in 1990, and to be fair now, is on the back foot. You know, it's crumbling. It doesn't really have any world power in terms of global, you know, reach in terms of states and armies and that kind of thing. So I think it was easy for them to write oh yeah, you know, this colonialism thing's bad, slavery is bad. I think if that was written in, you know, 1412 by the Ottomans, I think it would have been, you know, a little bit, you know, I think when Islam's on top, then they might have reconsidered that particular article. But yeah, that's how it's written anyway.
But it's interesting that they will do that, because this is totally contrary to the Quran. So this is amazing. All right, cool.
Well, it was the only example I could find that seemed to go against. I mean, everything else is pretty much in accordance with Sharia. So,
okay, all right. So what we've seen is that Sharia is actually made up of the human factor. It is people who say, okay, I'm a scholar because I've read the Quran, I've read the secondary text, tertiary texts, I've done this for 10 years. I have read different scholars, different legal representations of different things, and now I'm a mufti. So if now I can issue legal declarations, and now I can go and be part of a the fiqh is the ruling on a specific law, and this then depends on the interpretation of whom you are following, one of the madhabs, and this then has to go back to the Sharia, to the Hadith, and this has to go back to the Quran. So the Quran is always at the bottom of everything. So it's absolutely amazing how, for example, something like stoning, which is not even mentioned in the Quran, is still sourced in the Quran, because it says it is the punishment of the preferred punishment, because Allah's punishment is fire. So we are not allowed to burn people, but we're allowed to stone them, even though it does not mention this in the Quran. So the Quran is totally secondary here. This is the personal interpretation, and this is what Sharia does in these cases. It just makes shit up. It just says, this is what God would have wanted had he said this in the Quran. And then the most important thing that we need to take into consideration with Sharia is that it is always based on intention. In other words, the guy who intends to get drunk and drinks alcohol, then he gets punished for drinking alcohol, even though there is no punishment assigned in the Quran. But if he thinks this is Coca-Cola and it turns out to be Bacardi Cola, and he didn't know about that, then it was not his intention to drink Bacardi Coke, but his intention was to drink Coke. So if he drinks that, he will not get punished. So there's always the intent behind everything, and what you have as the background, what you're trying to do. And that, I think, is actually quite fair, because if you do, you can do things by mistake, and things do happen, but then it's fair enough to say, look, if this really was a true and honest mistake, then you cannot be punished for it. And that, I find, is a good principle. It's just, how do you find out? Well, this we don't know. Okay, is there anything else? Because now to go through all Sharia, I think, is a bit stupid. Vodka is all merciful. Are there any questions from the chat? Is there anything that anybody wants to ask, say, or whatever?
Just again, if you are a Muslim and you want to join us, now's a good time. I'm not sure if the Muslim I invited is in the chat. If you are N-I-N, then just message us. Just say, hi, Rob, Speaker's Corner, or ideally Gin and Tonic, and we can bring you into the panel to have a discussion. And remember, there's normally a Discord server, at least for some period of time after the show at 10 o'clock. Because
I don't think there's any point in dragging it out, because is there anything interesting that we have missed? Thunder, Rob, come on, you know this topic as well as I do.
No, I think a lot of it's interpretation of what people take from all the various sources, and they'll all argue their own point.
It is, as we've discussed already. It depends where you are in the world as to what ambiguous verse or surah you're going to cite, as far as the Quran is concerned. So, and you pretty much see that in the world scene today, anyway, which is what you said earlier on. So there's no one consistent sort of like, this is what you do and this is what you don't, and if you do this is the punishment, and if you don't do that, that's the reward.
And then this for me is the amazing part. Why, for example, does a Muslim man get circumcised? It's not in the Quran.
I have had that discussion that many times about circumcision as to why do Muslims get, I mean, God made the foreskin, so why would God ask you to remove the foreskin? Yeah, and because it doesn't make sense for him to do that. And now there is an argument where some will say, well, the foreskin shouldn't be circumcised as much as what it is. But irrespective of that, what is the connection between Islam and circumcision? And no Muslim can say it's just Allah's will or Allah knows best, which is, the usual AKB, Allah knows best. It's a bit like PBUH. It's just a default that they say. They don't know why they say, but they think that's the only answer they can have, which is totally illogical, because you see, the whole point of God is understanding as best as you can as to why He doesn't ask you to do certain things, or there would be some kind of like discernment that you'd make when God's asked you to do, like within the law. Oh well, be like, let's say for instance, if you follow a law that says no sex before marriage, you can actually look at that and discern, think, well, actually, I can see that there's some kind of level of morality now, or it makes some sense, or it's good for the community. You can come to those conclusions. But there's nothing in Islam where, if there is a defined law, when you look at that law, that you can turn around and say, well, actually, that makes sense when I use discernment.
And then to make it even worse, there is nothing about circumcision, but what about female genital mutilation? I mean, I think the male genital mutilation is also bad, but the female one is even worse. But this is not mentioned in the Quran. It is not mentioned in the Hadith. It is not mentioned anywhere. The only thing that you get is some like really vague description where the cut parts meet each other. Come on, how do you get from the one to the next? That is crazy.
Well, stops also, that is a terrible example of how, a fundamental right is being undermined, because in any other culture, that has got to be considered torture. And yet, but under the Cairo Declaration, that'd be all right, because it's, Sharia sanctioned. So suddenly torture doesn't matter anymore.
And the funny thing is, if people knew about this, why doesn't then the Quran come and say, well, FGM is haram? It's so easy. It can do it for fucking pork. Why can't you do it for female genital mutilation, which is really negative? There I would have thought, yes, there it's worth it. Forget the pork. Give people fridges, put the pork in the freezers or fridges or whatever, but please prohibit FGM. That's the priority. But it shows you what the priority is for this funny God. Yeah.
Also, I remember arguing a few times with Muslims about, the prohibition of pork. And I said, well, if it's for health reasons, surely Allah would have prohibited sugar, because sugar is far more damaging to, its consumers over a long period. And without trying to stereotype, I mean, I see so many, Muslim owned businesses that tend to be like sugary cake stores and snack shops and that kind of thing. And I just think, well, it seems like Allah missed out refined sugars. He should bring out part 2 to correct that.
Yep. Allah has priorities screwed up somehow, somewhere. Okay, are there any questions in the chat? Any comments? Anything else that we've missed? Can a man slap his wife if she cheats on him? Yeah, under circumstances, yes. Circumcision is not in the Quran. Yeah, we've said that. Bible, God asks for skins all the time. Yeah, okay, cool. But we're not talking about, The funny thing is, rings of Saturn, do you know that this is the foreskin of Jesus? Allah knows best. Sounds like a reanimator. On its own doesn't mean anything apart from where it says kill the disbelievers whenever you find them. There you go. Okay, so there's nothing in the chat. There's nothing here. There's nothing that I can add. Anything else that anybody wants to talk about? No. All right, then I think we need to call it. I think Rob is tired today. He's distracted.
Yeah, no, I'm here. Yeah, but there isn't a lot unless anybody wants to do something on Discord. But again, if you're a Muslim and you want to join us and tell us all about Sharia, then you're welcome to do, or indeed any other facts about reality in the Quran. Thoughts for next week's stops?
No, we need to find a new theme of the month because it's going to be June.
Oh, God, we'll have to do another poem.
Okay, remember we had a list of suggestions, which was Arabic, supremacy, hate, intolerance, apologetics, anthropomorphism, interpretation. Oh, Sharia we've done. I think Sharia we can skip. Should we go for apologetics?
Yeah, it sounds good. I think we can. What we could do is get some videos, go through some of the videos, and look at some of the
that's an excellent idea. Do that for a change.
The tactics
yes.
that are employed. We did a couple of videos, didn't we? I've done one or two with going through a video that hopefully illuminated things with a particular Muslim apologist and a guy arguing vegan rights, as we remember way back.
Okay, that's nice. Yeah.
And it just elucidates, right? Because that's one of my focuses. What tactics do people resort to when they don't have good reasons and evidence, right? Is it red herrings? Straw men are typically two of them. What else do they do to avoid answering or saying, I don't know, or whatever the case may be? So maybe we can do that. And again, if you're watching and you've got a video that you'd like us to perhaps go through, keep it to about half an hour. I'd say something like that. We could run a video through here. We'll stop and start it. We'll give our comments. We'll point out what's going on. And it just helps all of us, really, but also viewers to notice what is going on. We could even do something with hijab and cosmic skeptic. He did a good one of his own. But, there's plenty to choose.
That's actually fascinating how he is completely deconstructing hijab, hey? But completely. And then, of course, Socrates' son came in and he, really put the lid on it. This is so amazing. Oh, I
like some of the rhetoric of Socrates' son, but sometimes I'm like, get to the point now. I understand you're using the rhetoric and telling us how stupid the guy is or whatever the case is, but yeah, people who are watching aren't going to necessarily be convinced by that. So let's get to the meat of it now and show the parts. And for me, that's the, I think maybe the rhetoric is useful as well, but for me, just let's get to the bottom. Let me show you what he said, why it's wrong, or here he said this, then he said that, etc. Because it's easy to miss if you're just getting sort of hypnotized or you're following in the flow of a conversation.
He's building it up, Rob. Come on.
I mean, I watched that Cosmic Skeptic video, the whole debate where he was taking it apart with hijab, and I mean, editing the footage where he misquoted the Quran and having the mic cut out when Cosmic Skeptic was talking about the wife beating verses in the Quran. I mean, it was so dishonest. It was ridiculous. I mean, hijab looked like an absolute idiot after that video when I watched it. I thought
he did actually respond to it, interestingly enough, which is a rarity. So he did actually respond. I'll see if I can find the link to post them.
It was pathetic. I watched it. I thought it was awful. He was rubbish.
Yeah, this was a declaration of bankruptcy. He didn't really know what to do. And Maverick, let's talk about the positives. We spent 2 hours on this. Okay, now how many times it was very difficult to find the positives. Okay, it took me about 2 weeks to find them out, and then we spent a full segment of the Gin and Tonic show on the positives of the Quran. Yes, I am able to acknowledge this. This is what I'm always saying. I am able to acknowledge that there are positive things in Islam. Why is it that a Muslim cannot acknowledge that there are negatives? This is the question that I'm asking.
They can't, right? Because if there were negatives there, then it couldn't be from God, and then it wouldn't be worth following. So they're committed to the idea that they have to follow something that is perfect and unchanging and error-free. And so they start, I was speaking about it today, they start with that presupposition. So any critique that is brought, we must be wrong because the Quran can't be. So if you start from that dogmatic position, which is exactly the opposite of science, of course, then you're always going to bat away thing and say, and if I don't know, somebody knows it. Somebody's got the answer. You guys must be wrong. I mean, we've showed the irrefutable inheritance error, and there's still people like Maverick who are deluded into thinking they've got a response to that. We've tried it with other people. There's no way out of this. Even his attempt has failed miserably. But do you think people will change their mind and go, hang on, this couldn't have been from God. He can't do basic arithmetic. Nope. Must be somebody else's problem.
There's something going on in the side show there. Can I just comment on it? It's between Maverick and Reanimator, and they're talking about Mavericks just brought out and drive them out where they drove you out. But what Maverick seems to know, because that sounds like some people have tried to take over Islamically controlled land, and then the Muslims have come back to drive those other people out, the non-Muslims, to get their land back. That's not the situation. What was happening was Muhammad was going into areas, taking over the land. People were coming and kicking him out, kicking the Muslims out. And then this convenient surah comes up, oh, drive them out from where they drove you out. So he goes and back and takes back their land again. That's a bit like some Muslims coming into my flat, right? They drive me out because there's 2 or 3 of them. I come back with one of my brothers. I drive them out of the flat. Right, so we got rid of them, and then a convenience surah comes along and says, "Well, drive them out from where they drove you out, so they come and kick me out my flat again." That's not how it works. The Muslims are always proactive in taking over other people's land.
But Thunderous, that entire mentality explains the whole thing with Andalusia and Spain. That mentality is that even though they took the land over, they said, I was arguing with a guy who said, no, but there were native Muslims before we even got there. And I was like, what history book are you reading? It's just trying to excuse the fact that you invaded, and then when you finally got kicked out, you want to complain about it. Well, sorry, that's history.
That's the Middle East all over, and Muslims and whining on about it. They went over and took over some land, and then they got kicked out for it. And they've been whining ever since. That's why they use certain languages like the Old Testament is not a deed to the land.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a story.
All right, then we'll go to the Hadith of the week.
Make just one more thing? Stops. Just one more thing. Just in the spirit of being fair and saying something nice about Islam. In terms of the Cairo Declaration, there is one bit that says you're forbidden to take hostages. It's a very simple sentence, which I think is good. The only problem was I was thinking, does that mean that they'll just have to kill everyone instead?
Yeah, but they do all the time. This is quite funny. Funny that they should mention that, because that is one of the things. This whole ransoming, this is big. I mean, half the income of ISIS was oil, and I think a quarter was ransom.
The thing is, they're not hostages. If you kill all the men and then you take the women for what your right hand possesses, then they become your slaves or your sex slaves or your concubines.
Well, that's what I was thinking. That's why I was thinking it was a double-edged sword, that article, because it's kind of encouraging them either to kill them or to, forcibly convert them.
In the chat now, you have the links to the response by Hijab. If you want to laugh about something, if you want to see somebody who's really lost, grasping at straws and really desperate, and here I think here you see, or you're starting to see at least, the inability to think clearly, where he's really just scratching around for words, and he cannot put his thought through. It's so crazy. All right, guys, we're going to go to the Discord server, and I'm going to go and read the Hadith of the week, and that's it. Today I'm going to give you 2 for the price of 1. Oh, well, both are free, so say thank you to Muhammad, because the first one is incredibly short, and I felt a little bit embarrassed. It's in volume 7. It's by Bukhari, 69, number 535. And it's narrated by Thumama bin Abdullah. Anas used to breathe twice or thrice in the vessel while drinking, and used to say that the Prophet used to take 3 breaths while drinking. That's the end of the hadith. It's just one tiny sentence.
What the hell's the point of that?
That the Prophet was taking 3
I was
breaths
very
while
used to
drinking.
play it.
3 fingers out first thing in the morning. He used to breathe through his left nostril and then his right. Pick his first ear, his left ear, and then his right.
So I was a little bit embarrassed. So I'm giving you a second one as a bonus.
Tedious.
This is in volume 1, book 4, number 143. And this is by Ibn Abbas. The Prophet said, this is directly the Prophet, okay? If any one of you, on having sexual relations with his wife, said, and before starting, in the name of... I'm sorry. Okay, let me try. If any one of you, on having sexual relations with his wife, you have to say before starting, in the name of Allah, O Allah, protect us from Satan and also protect what you bestow upon us, i.e. the coming offspring from Satan. And if it is destined that they should have a child, then Satan will never be able to harm that offspring. But you have to say it first.
Hilarious, isn't it?
My parents didn't do that.
Yeah.
I'm sure my father didn't say to
So,
my
but-
mother, look, in the name of Allah, oh Allah, protect us from Satan, and now I will go into you. I've never had any problems with Satan. No Satan has come to me or anything, so I'm fine without it. So it's okay.
But the difficulty with that is, though, every child has been touched by Satan other than Jesus. So why would you pray for Satan to not come near your child when every child in the history of mankind has been touched by Satan apart from Jesus?
Yeah, but not
In
harm.
Islamic
This
sense.
is the difference. Touch and harm is different.
But why
Okay,
touch him
where
if
is
he's
it?
not harming him?
Where does it say that? Is it Hadith?
Yeah.
Because I've never come across that. Okay. Well, guys, there you have it. Now you know exactly what you do the next time you have sex with somebody. You say, oh, Allah, oh, please protect us from Satan. I wonder what the girl is going to say. She's going to hop out of bed and run away screaming.
Who's this lunatic? Where did he escape from? Can they come and collect him, please? He's talking to himself.
Oh, goodness. This is so funny. Anyway. Okay, ladies, gents, and others, thank you very much. Let's call it a day. And if you want to, you can still chat a bit later. And remember, the difference is that here, this is recorded. It's put onto Facebook. It's put onto YouTube. Whatever is on Discord stays on Discord. So if you don't have to be scared if you want to sort of divulge something. It's not recorded or anything, so it's fine. All right, we'll see you next week then. Thank you very much. Thank you to the panel. Thank you for the chat. Thank you for the questions and the interaction. Brilliant stuff. See you next week.
Good night. See you on Discord.
Thank you tonight. So I thought your
Everyone,
item was
bye.
done very well. Thank you.
And thank you, Clary, for the lecture on the difference in the human rights as understood by the United Nations and Islam. That's very much appreciated. Thank you.
You are welcome.